Hi there, and welcome to the Deep Dive. This is where we take the materials you shared with us, plunge in deep, and pull out the most important, fascinating insights. The goal, for you to walk away not just informed, but genuinely intrigued. Today we're turning our attention to a book that, well, it sparked a massive reaction among readers, City of Starlight, or A Court of Mist and Fury. It's the second installment in Sarah J. Maas's incredibly popular series. And the sources you brought us really suggest this book is a major turning point. It seems to redefine characters, the world itself even. So our mission for this deep dive is to explore this pivotal book using the material you provided. We want to uncover its key story elements, those character transformations, the powerful themes, and really understand why it resonated so profoundly. All right, let's unpack this. To start us off, what exactly is this book? In terms of the series, its genre.
Well, as you said, it's the sequel, the second book in the A Court of Thorns and Roses series by Sarah J. Maas, and it picks up pretty directly after the high-stakes ending of the first one.
Okay.
And genre-wise. The material mentioned a blend. Right. It's definitely fantasy and romance. You hear that term romantasy thrown around a lot for it. What's interesting, based on the sources, is this whole discussion around its category. Sometimes it gets labeled young adult, maybe because the first one leaned that way. But the sources are pretty clear. The themes, the content, some of the more explicit elements really push it into new adult.
Okay, so it's pushing those boundaries.
Definitely seems that way according to the material provided.
And it clearly made waves. The sources you gave us really highlight its impact. It wasn't just another sequel, was it?
Not at all. The sources paint it as a real phenomenon. I mean, it hit #1 on the New York Times bestseller list. That's huge.
Wow.
And on Goodreads, which is, a massive hub for readers. Over 235,000 reviews are mentioned. It even snagged the Goodreads Choice Award for Best Fantasy back in 2016.
Just fantasy, okay.
Yeah, and the sources note that Win came from a category sometimes called a young adult fantasy, but again, it feeds that debate about whether NA fits better.
Interesting nuance there. And beyond the U.S., you mentioned the Turkish platform.
Yes, 1,000 kitab. The engagement numbers provided are really striking. Over 1,500 reads logged, nearly 600 likes, and, get this, over 1,400 quotes saved from the book.
1,400 quotes. That's incredible.
It really is. It just underscores how deeply it connected, not just globally, but specifically within the Turkish reading community, too.
Okay, so we've established it's a massively popular, kind of genre-bending sequel that made a huge splash. Let's dive into the story itself, then. The deep dive kicks off about 3 months after, well, the trauma of the first book. The material focuses a lot on Feyre here. What do the sources tell us about her state?
Right. The material paints a pretty stark picture. She's back in the Spring Court, which you'd think would be a safe haven after everything under the mountain. But despite being high fae now, she's described as anything but happy. The sources consistently bring up her severe trauma.
Like PTSD.
Exactly. Clear signs of PTSD, depression are mentioned, nightmares, even issues with eating. She's profoundly marked by what happened, what she had to do.
And the Spring Court itself isn't helping.
No, quite the opposite according to the sources. It's described as incredibly stifling. She's engaged to Tamlin, but feels trapped. He's presented as being overly protective, almost controlling.
Confining her.
Yeah, keeping her isolated in the manor. And crucially, he forbids her from exploring her new fae powers. The sources really emphasize he just doesn't acknowledge or help her deal with the trauma.
So that environment is actually making things worse for her.
Seems so. The material suggests her mental state deteriorates there. It sets up her initial conflict perfectly internal and external.
That sounds utterly suffocating. A gilded cage, like you said earlier. How does she get out? The sources mentioned an agreement, a bargain from Book 1.
Precisely. That's her way out initially. The bargain she made with Rysand, the High Lord of the Night Court, while under the mountain. The deal was she had to spend 1 week a month with him. At first, she sort of uses this as just a break from the Spring Court's atmosphere.
Okay, and her view of Rysand at this point? Still the villain from Book 1.
Initially, yes. Based on his actions in the first book, which were, let's be honest, complex and often antagonistic, she sees him as the bad guy. But the sources make a huge point that this book flips that perception.
How so?
They emphasize she starts seeing the real Rysand. Not cruel, not self-serving. He's shown as kind, supportive, incredibly intelligent, and fiercely devoted to his people. A key piece of context the sources provide is his own time under the mountain. He apparently endured 50 years, basically acting as, well, the text calls it Amaranta's whore.
Wow.
Yeah, a calculated sacrifice, the sources say, to protect his people and his hidden city, Valaris.
So that reveal forces Feyre and the reader to rethink everything.
Absolutely. It challenges judgments based on appearances or actions under duress. A huge character shift.
And she's not just with Rysand during these weeks. Right? The material brings up this group, the Inner Circle. Who are they?
Yes, the Inner Circle. Hugely important. The sources describe them as Rysand's core team, his most trusted, fiercely loyal friends, and they become incredibly important for Feyre, too.
Who's in this circle?
The sources introduce the main players. Cassian, who's this formidable Illyrian warrior, the commander. Then Azriel, the Shadow Singer, a spy master with his own traumatic past. There's Morgan, or Morisand's cousin, known for, interestingly, not being able to lie. And Amren, who's described as ancient, incredibly powerful, kind of mysterious.
Sounds like quite a crew.
Definitely. The sources highlight their dynamic, deep loyalty, respect, unwavering support for each other, and Rysand. And they welcome Feyre pretty quickly. The material explicitly mentions she finds her chosen family with them.
The theme comes up a lot, chosen family.
It's very strong here. And the place itself, the Night Court, specifically Valaris, Rysand's hidden city, it's the total opposite of what Feyre expected. It's not dark and scary. It becomes the sanctuary for her. Freedom, healing, acceptance, a stark contrast to the Spring Court.
So the environment and the people are key to her recovery.
Crucial, according to the sources. The change is vital.
Okay, so she transitions from this oppressive place to one of freedom, acceptance with this really supportive group. How do the sources describe Feyre's own change during this time, her transformation?
Her transformation is really presented as the absolute heart of this book. The material details her healing process. It's not overnight, of course, but it's significant. Instead of being restricted, Rysand actively encourages her to embrace her new high fae powers, to learn control.
And what powers does she have? The sources mentioned they came from the High Lords.
Yeah, it's noted they're drawn from her experiences and connection to the 7 High Lords. Things like shape-shifting, control over elements, water, fire, ice, air healing, even darkness manipulation. It's a wide range.
So she's becoming powerful.
Physically, yes, but mentally, too. The sources mention she learns to read and write, skills she didn't have as a human. She grows more self-assured, more independent. There's a line in the material summarizing it powerfully. She goes from a broken and helpless girl to a strong and independent woman.
That's quite an arc. And this is all happening while the larger plot is moving forward. You mentioned a threat.
Exactly. Intertwined with her personal growth is this escalating external threat. The sources reveal they uncover a major danger. The King of Hybern. He's planning a devastating war against Prythian, the Feylands, and the human world.
Okay, so the stakes are rising.
Big time. This discovery pushes Feyre and the Inner Circle into some dangerous missions, including recovering half of this really important artifact called the Book of Breathings.
Right. So her personal journey and these huge world-level stakes are happening side by side. What about Talon? What's going on with that relationship while she's in the Night Court?
Well, the sources are pretty clear. It deteriorates badly. The relationship becomes more and more strained. It's described as toxic, controlling.
He just can't accept the changes in her.
Seems that way. His inability, or maybe refusal, to understand her healing process really comes to a head. There's a disastrous party mentioned at the Spring Court. That event, according to the material, just crystallizes how incompatible they are now, how controlling he is. And Feyre breaks off the engagement.
A decisive moment.
Absolutely pivotal. The sources say she leaves the Spring Court for good, chooses the Night Court, chooses Rysand, chooses her independence.
And her relationship with Rysand deepens.
Significantly. In that environment of safety and freedom, the sources confirm a deep love develops. And then there's the reveal of the mating bond.
Ah, the mating bond. That's a big deal in this world, right?
Huge. Described as this powerful, inherent Fae connection. The sources really use the contrast, Tamlin's controlling love versus Rysand's empowering love, to drive home that theme.
And the Hybern threat you mentioned, does it just stay a threat, or does that actually impact them in this book?
Oh, it becomes very active, very dangerous. This is where things get incredibly intense. The sources describe Hybern's forces launching attacks. And critically, the material notes these attacks are actually helped by a betrayal from some human queens.
Human queens betraying the Fae.
Okay, yeah. And one of the biggest conflicts shown is an attack on Valaris itself, the hidden city.
No.
Yes. Feyre and the Inner Circle are forced to defend it. It's a major turning point, bringing war right to their doorstep.
That sounds incredibly dramatic.
Okay.
And knowing Sarah J. Maas, I'm guessing the ending isn't exactly quiet. How does this book leave things? What's the setup for book 3?
Yeah, quiet is not the word. The ending, as detailed in the sources, is just packed with cliffhangers. Classic Maas. Feyre and Rysand get trapped while trying to unite the two halves of that Book of Breathings. And then, in a really shocking development, Feyre's human sisters, Nesta and Elaine, are captured by Hybern.
Oh, no.
And worse, they're forcibly turned into High Fae,
Hmm.
just fundamentally changed against their will.
That's brutal. And Tamlin, where does he land in all this?
Well, any ambiguity about Tamlin is gone. His betrayal is confirmed. He's actually allied himself with the King of Hybern.
Allied with the enemy. Why?
The sources suggest it's driven, at least partly, by this desperate, twisted desire to get Feyre back. It shows how his possessiveness led him down a really dark path.
Wow. Okay. So what does Feyre do?
Her final move is pretty brilliant, actually, strategic. She tricks Tamlin, makes him believe she's broken, that she genuinely wants to return to him in the Spring Court.
She goes back.
She accepts his offer to go back, yes, but her real goal, she's embracing her new title, High Lady of the Night Court. Her intention is to be a spy.
A spy in the Spring Court.
Exactly, infiltrating from within. So the book ends with war basically inevitable. Alliances are shattered, characters are in peril or transformed, and crucially, Rysand and the Inner Circle think she actually chose Tamlin. They don't know she's playing a dangerous game.
What a setup. That masterfully tees up the next book, A Court of Wings and Ruin.
Without a doubt. The sources make it clear it's a very effective, high-stakes ending.
It's obvious this book is heavy on plot and character arcs. But stepping back, what are the big ideas, the themes the sources say this book really digs into?
There are several really crucial themes identified in the material. Top of the list is definitely trauma, healing, and self-discovery. Feyre's journey is central to that.
From broken to strong, as you said.
Precisely. Then there's a major exploration of love, freedom, and empowerment. That contrast between Tamlin and Rysand really highlights this love that controls versus love that liberates.
Makes sense? What else?
Loyalty, trust, and communication, or the lack thereof. You see the strength of the Inner Circle's bond built on trust, and then you see the breakdown with Tamlin, partly due to failed communication. Sacrifice and responsibility also come through. Rysand's past, Feyre's choices as the conflict grows.
And the chosen family idea again?
Yes, belonging and chosen family is huge. Feyre finding her true home, her true people, not through blood or obligation, but through connection.
Any other interesting tidbits or connections the sources mention? Like for the curious reader?
Yeah, a couple of things. The sources point out strong parallels to the Hades and Persephone myth. Rysand as this complex, dark lord, Feyre drawn into his world, but finding life and belonging there.
I can see that.
Also, the material explicitly flags trigger warnings. PTSD, depression, suicidal thoughts, abuse, emotional, physical, anxiety, nightmares. It raises that point about handling mature, sensitive themes in fantasy, especially with such a wide audience.
That's important context.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. That really was a deep dive. From intense personal trauma to, like, world-ending wars brewing, this book covers so much ground.
It really does. City of Starlight is consistently framed in the sources as transformative for the series. It doesn't just move the plot, it reshapes characters, relationships, expands the world significantly. Its appeal seems to come from that mixed Feyre's relatable journey, the very popular rise in Feyre romance, that powerful inner circle dynamic. It really cemented Maas's place in modern fantasy, according to the material.
And it absolutely leaves you hanging, doesn't it? Ready for what's next. So, with Feyre now deep undercover in the Spring Court, her sisters forcibly changed, and this massive war looming, here's something for you to mull over. What shape does that war in the next book even take? And how will these characters, also changed, navigate the incredibly dangerous path ahead? Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive into A Court of Mist and Fury. We really hope exploring this pivotal book through the material you shared was insightful.
Yeah, definitely a lot packed into that one book.
Don't forget to subscribe, like, and maybe leave us a comment with your own thoughts. We'll see you next time for another deep dive. Perhaps we'll tackle the third book, A Court of Wings and Ruin. Until then, take care.